Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Hypermode Live. My name's Will, and this time we are joined by Jessica. Jessica is our head of marketing at Hypermode. Hello, Jessica.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Great. So we are here today to talk about Hypermode agents for marketing use cases. If you've been on this channel the last few weeks, we launched in beta our Hypermode agents tooling, which is a way of building agents with natural language. So being able to describe sort of the type of agent you want to create, the workflows in natural language, and then having like highly scalable agents working to fulfill those roles for you. And we've done a couple of these live streams to show some examples and get folks started. I think our goal today, though, is to talk about sort of like a specific vertical or specific type of use case for folks in marketing or folks that want to understand how to use agents for marketing flows. So that's the goal for today. We're gonna go through the steps to sign up for Hypermode agents, and then everyone watching live will get a code to unlock a free month of Hypermode agents. So if you want to follow along while we go through that, that would be great. But before we dive into that, it's been a few weeks, Jessica, since we've launched Hypermode agents. We've had a lot of discussions with users and customers building agents. I think it's really been interesting for me to see like the use cases that people have and where they've had like successes and this sort of thing. But Jessica, from your side, like what's been the reaction? What are you seeing folks doing with Hypermode agents so far?
Yeah, it feels like forever, but well, you and I launched this like 2 weeks ago. There's been a ton of excitement, which is really exciting, I think, from our side, just how people are embracing very much like this new way of working with agents, moving away from like a chat-based piece, but actually having your agent go do stuff on your behalf. I think that's really awesome. We are a small but mighty go-to-market team, and so having kind of these additional agents work on your behalf, I think, has really resonated with the kind of the broader market. I would kind of boil it down to maybe like these like three key themes that I keep hearing. One of our colleagues, Lexi, went to an event last week, and someone said, automate the mindless, like focus on the human. And I think that really resonated with me. It's kind of this really interesting way of like technology changing the way that we interact as humans, we interact as organizations. So like the first kind of observation is just like, is the market ready for this? I think people are really interested. There's a lot of what I'm going to call like agent curious folks that are kind of, they've heard a lot of things. They've probably seen a bunch of stuff on social. They've read a lot of articles, but they're not really quite sure where to start. It's like, what's the best place to go do this? And Will, you've done kind of this awesome job of the last couple of webinars of like, here's like these small incremental steps. Today is just like one more incremental step, just happens to be focused on marketing. So I think it's a really interesting time for you to like go like dip your toe. You don't have to like jump into the pool, into the deep end. But I think Hypermode agents makes it easy to do that. I think the second piece is this aspect of like prompt engineering. Like we've heard a lot about that in the last, I don't know, 18 or so months of like, how do I talk to the system in a certain way to get them to do the thing that I want them to go do? I think we can all agree that sometimes speaking in English is real hard, right? Communication is hard. And at the end of the day, what we've seen kind of resonate in the product is we try to abstract a lot of that away, right? We're going to walk through our concierge agent and kind of this meta aspect of like agents creating agents. Well, computers probably talk to computers better than humans can. And so that's kind of this really interesting piece of how do you stay in natural language as long as possible, how you work with these agents. And the last piece I think to kind of encapsulate it is like behavioral change management piece. It's like, how do you rethink the way that you work? I think you and I have created like hundreds of agents trying to figure out ones. I've created hundreds. I probably use 3 or 4 of them pretty like very regularly on a regular basis, but it took me some like iteration to kind of get there. And so I'm really excited. My passion is actually education. Like, how do we teach people like how to learn? And I think it's a interesting inflection of where all these technologies are coming into play.
Yeah, that's interesting. But the natural language piece is, and you mentioned the sort of ability for an agent to create your agent, and like the importance of getting this prompt engineering down correctly. When we launched Hypermode agents, this is something that I guess I didn't anticipate initially would be I guess like have the value or like be something that folks find really interesting and powerful, because maybe I kind of took for granted that, well, you have to really think about the structure of your system prompt for your agent, the agent instructions. You have to read like the prompt engineering guides, understand these best practices, and tinker around with these things. And that's just something you're going to have to know. But it turns out like you don't like that's actually like a well understood structure for these agent system prompts. And if you're like a domain expert, if you just want to like build an agent that does something for you, you work at a company, and or maybe for like a personal workflow, like what needs to be done, and you just want to sort of like describe that to your agent. The Hypermode concierge, which we're going to show in a minute here, goes through this like step-by-step discussion to sort of help you build up that system prompt, and then generates that system prompt that describes the role and background of your agent in the format that LLMs like understand best. So that was one thing that I think like surprised me. Just because I was like, oh, this is actually like a much better way of building an agent with natural language. And then another thing that really surprised me too, or I guess that makes sense, in hindsight, and I think we were right in anticipating this sort of abstraction, is like the value of having a domain specific agent, or having like a team of domain specific agents rather than like a general purpose agent. I think being able to hone in on really describing the right background and role for the agent so they can understand, like just like any other organization, like what's your role, what are you thinking about when you wake up in the morning to go do with your team. And an agent fits into that flow as well. So you really want like a team of domain specific agents with the right role and background, with the right connections. We'll see how we can add connections through MCP servers to other services in a minute. But that, I think, really that combination of role and background plus the right connections, and of course memory and all these sorts of things. But that's kind of the core, I think, to building the right agent team. So
Yeah.
that's been really fun so far.
Yeah. It's like hiring an intern. It's hiring a new team. It's trying to figure out exactly what you want them to go do, being clear as a manager, as a peer, as a colleague, like how you want to direct them. Um, I have 2 little kids, right? You got to like tease them, almost like bribe them in a certain way. And if that communication style doesn't work, you try something different. And so I like the domain specific pieces, right? Like, what do you think about every day waking up and you're walking into your job? How do you use agents, to your advantage to be more productive, to remove the toil, to move the swivel chairing across all the different tools that we know people are using?
Totally. And I think this diagram in our docs does a good job of kind of explaining the role of natural language and the role that Hypermode agents has, right? So if you're familiar with Hypermode, we build and maintain an open source agent framework called Modus. We have tooling for building knowledge graphs. We have model hosting and a model router. And you can think of, a sort of natural language way of getting started with that framework, like with that same sort of highly scalable purpose-built infrastructure for agent orchestration with Modus. But Hypermode agents is really about just describing the agent that you want in natural language, and under the hood, that's running on top of our Modus agent framework, memory with knowledge graph, like all these sorts of things are there. I'll drop a link to this to the docs in the chat if folks want to check that out in more detail. And then I think we'll dive in. Cool. And by the way, as folks are joining and watching, like, please feel free to drop any questions in the chat. Definitely want to make this as interactive as possible. So if you have questions or comments, feedback, please let us know in the chat. We're watching that off to the side as well. Cool. So this is Hypermode's agent interface. We see this in the threads tab. If you sign into Hypermode, I'll drop a link to that too. Just hypermode.com/login. And you can sign in. You'll be prompted to create a workspace, just sort of a name for what you want to call your workspace. You can invite other folks to that workspace too. And then look for threads, and you'll see this interface. And initially, there's a single agent here. This is Sidekick, your personal assistant. So we can see the system prompt for this agent, right, which is composed with its identity and its context, instructions. There's a model that's orchestrating this agent. By default, we use GPT-4.1. And then we have this concept of connections. So connections, these are essentially MCP servers that allow your agent to interact with different services through tools. If you've heard this concept of tool use, MCP is a great way for external services to expose tools, sort of like an interface to those services. And so by default, Sidekick has the Google Calendar connection. So Sidekick is sort of like a getting started agent. And I've already gone through the OAuth flow, but that's how you authorize your calendar here. So let's see how we interact with Sidekick, and then we'll see how we can create new agents as well. These pills here that you see, these are tasks, which we'll talk a bit more about what that concept of a task is in a minute. But we can interact with our agent either by selecting tasks. Think of tasks as like, learned skills that an agent has. And this one is just, hey, how can I work with Sidekick? Well, you can interact with my calendar. And then, of course, we can chat with Sidekick. So let's ask Sidekick, where am I traveling over the next 2 weeks? So this is the user message that's going into our agent. And our Sidekick agent is making a decision to call tools, right? So the Google Calendar connection exposes tools for interacting with my calendar, like searching events, listing events, creating new events, this sort of thing. So it's searching over a certain date range for all the events, and then kind of interpreting those, understanding which are flights, which are meetings in different locations. Looks like I'm in San Francisco. I'm going to Denver, back to San Francisco, going to Austin, back to San Francisco, right? So it's looked at my calendar to kind of determine, based on the flights that I have scheduled, maybe like hotel stays and meetings, that's where I'm going to be. Cool. So this is like super useful also for preparing for meetings, these sorts of things. Jessica's going to go in a deeper dive on those sorts of things. But I wanted to show Sidekick just as kind of the getting started experience, like showing the initial like concepts here of adding a connection, how we interact with the agent. In order to create your own agent or create a new agent, you'll need to upgrade to Hypermode Pro tier, which while we're in beta, is available for free just by scheduling a pro onboarding call. We want to do these are like super short, like 15-minute calls, just to kind of understand what folks are wanting to build, and sort of setting expectations and just kind of understanding what folks are wanting to accomplish, and explaining things while we're in beta tier. But for folks watching the live stream today, we're going to go ahead and give you a special link and code to upgrade right now to Pro tier for a free month. And so there's a special URL. That's hypermode.com/fast track, which I'll drop in the chat here. And if you go to that link, then you'll sign into Hypermode if you're not already signed in, and then you'll be prompted for an access code. And our access code for today's live stream is hype-live-marketing, and we'll drop that in the chat as well. And this will unlock Pro Tier. So now my workspace has been upgraded. And the first thing I see is this new Hypermode Concierge agent, which is our agent for creating agents. But let me stop there. And Jessica, who, as I said earlier, is our head of marketing, our marketing expert, is going to walk through some agent examples for marketing use cases.
Cool. Let me.
And while Jessica's getting set up there, I see a couple of questions here. So maybe we'll take those. So one question, how can I add this to my website? Yeah, so that's a good question. If we look at the Modus agent framework, Modus exposes a GraphQL API. So Modus is the orchestration layer kind of that's running what we see here, hosting this Hypermode agent experience. And so one way to integrate this agent experience into your website would be through the GraphQL API that's exposed through Modus. You can also look at if you wanted the UI components of this as well. If you take a look at some of the recent blog posts that we have on the Hypermode blog, look at the different sort of UI experiences around this. I think the best one here is the stateless to stateful. Drop a link to this in the chat. And also looking at event streaming with Modus as well. That again also uses the GraphQL subscriptions to sort of stream events like chat from your agent as well. So those would be good resources, as well as the docs. I'll drop those in the chat as well.
Cool. We'll obviously introduce Sidekick. I thought I would do maybe show just like another way that you can work with Sidekick for something I like to use it with. As most of you in marketing know, we are constantly context switching, jumping from event to event, and sometimes I forget exactly what we did. So I like to ask Sidekick, are there any events from last week that I need to? So as Will showed, it's going to pull the list of events from my calendar. This is a really easy way for me just to remember if there are follow-up action items, if there are events that we run. We're constantly trying to go meet folks at different places. And so you can see, this is my real calendar. You can see all the different events that we've had, meeting with analysts, prepping for webinars, meeting with other kind of partners in this space. But we did run an event last week. What about the founders? Oops. We had an awesome partner with the Founders Creative community. They are 10,000 plus founders and things like that. Around San Francisco and kind of more broadly. So we did have a workshop with them. It was an event with a Luma link. And so I probably should send a follow-up to all the folks that attended or did not attend. So can you draft an email to the use the Luma link as context? So this is a really easy way for me to just do everything in Hypermode and see. Very easy. It grabbed the event link. It had a really nice follow-up connecting. It had the subject line. This is what now I can just go copy and paste into my email. And it's just a really fast way for me to iterate through all the different types of follow-ups that we typically like to do at these events. So that's just a really simple way that I've used Sidekick on a very regular basis. You saw Will's travel schedule. Mine isn't as crazy as that, but in marketing, we're often, hopping around to webinars, live events, roundtables, and things like that. And so this is a great way for me to keep organized on all of that. So now I'm going to move to creating an agent. This is what I'm really excited about. So here we have Hypermode Concierge. And as Will and I chatted about, this aspect of generating the system prompt for what you want your agent to go do tends to have a lot of this iteration. And so the goal here for Hypermode Concierge is to provide very much this like step-by-step guided tour for building an agent. So here in marketing, y'all probably know that we generate a lot of content. Content is a great way for us to talk about everything from feature functionality, product launches, all the way to thought leadership to reach kind of our broader audience. So top of mind for me every time I wake up in the morning is I need a content marketer. I need someone to help me take all the information and keep up the pace of how our product and engineering team are releasing on a regular cadence, and deliver from there. And so, as you can see, Concierge is asking a little bit more about who this agent's going to represent. I'm going to give it our website. This is a great shortcut for a marketing team, a lean marketing team, to give a little bit more context. Our tone will grab some of our product information. I don't quite have a brand style guide yet. And so this is an easy way for the agent to grab some of that. Let's see, it looks like the agent maybe got stuck. Ooh, there we go. So it called the tool, it did some information gathering around Hypermode, our website, it grabbed our headline, some additional text. Let's see, the main focus for content marketing. So I'm going to tell it everything from blogs to social to press releases. So here I'm just giving it a little bit more guidance about what we want it to go do. It's going to suggest a fun name. I'm going to go with number 2. I will say, as the agent is thinking here, I always get stuck on the name. I always try to find something that's fun. And I started with real human names and then decided it was too much of a call to someone else I knew in that role. So I try to keep it a little bit more adjective down rather than actual thing. And so it's asking me a few more questions around like tone. What I'm actually going to go is I'm going to give it an example of a blog. I'll use our, I'm going to give it our announcement blog. So that will give it some specifics around how we talk about our product, the target audience that we're doing. It'll grab and it'll scrape all of that information. I think what we found is a lot of these LLMs are great at kind of pattern matching. And so it'll give me a first piece of that. And so you can see it pulled the information from the blog. It gave additional context about, who we are, what the brand voice is. And this is all right in a matter of seconds. So go ahead
And one thing that I think is interesting here, we were talking earlier with Sidekick, and we saw the Google Calendar connection where we specifically had to add that and authorize our calendar through the OAuth flow. But there are also a number of built-in tools like the company research, the web search as well. So we have lots of functionality for going out and fetching data also that is just sort of built in as tools available to our agent as well.
So I will say, I wish there was just like this, hurrah, your new agent has been born. It should get like a, agent ID card to memorialize this. But as you can see here on the left, we created model muse or mode muse, apologies. So all the information about itself is here. It has what the description is, it has the title that I gave it, and then it has all that context that it pulled from the website and the blog that I gave it. Again, as Will mentioned, we do have this option for choosing different models. I read somewhere where, O3 is great at editing. We have different models for different pieces. And I will say I've been playing around a lot. And it's really easy to just swap something out. Why don't I change this to a different model for now, just so y'all can see. And then obviously we have our great agent icon here, maybe some resemblance to other folks on our go-to-market team. The other piece that I want to add here is connections, right? Will talked about, well, how do you get your agent to actually go take action on your behalf? And that often requires it to have different tools that it can reach out to. So some of the most common tools that I use in marketing is Google Calendar, because we're often scheduling time to review with stakeholders and sync on dates and launches and positioning and things like that. Through Gmail. Notion is our collaboration space. We have a lot of content and documentation and previous thoughts that we've dropped there. And then I'm going to add Ref, which is a index version of Hypermode's docs, which is a great way for me to find information. Sometimes docs and how we release quickly on engineering is a little bit faster than how much I can keep up with it. So that's a great way to add that there. So we're going to add these connections. And now your agent is ready. So what I can do here is now give Mode Muse its first task. So things that I typically like to use a content marketer for is constantly relaunching the things that you've launched, right? I think you all know, if you're on this webinar, the AI space is moving real fast. And so to keep up to date, we're going to say relaunch last 3 releases of Hypermode. So I'm going to give it just kind of a general prompt here of we've released a bunch of features, functionality. I want to rejigger those and relaunch them in different modes. And so the agent here is going to take action, kind of reason through exactly what that means. I probably didn't even need to say that it's Hypermode. It should know that already. And it looks like it has suggested a different approach here, right? Identify key features. So it's giving more strategy about what I can go do. So I'm going to ask it to look at our docs and see. So I'm going to give it a little bit more direction. It's calling a tool Ref, which is our index version of docs, and it's looking through some of the pieces. I'm going to ask it to try again. I think we can definitely kind of double click and see. Looks like it failed to call the tool. Let me just try again. And so, as you know, the technology is moving so quickly that sometimes we gotta kind of nudge the model in the right way. I'm just going to double check that looks like my connections are there. Let me try one more time, and then we'll do something a little bit more crafty.
One of the things that's interesting about relying on these MCP servers for connections is these are like remote MCP servers that are often using other services, and you want to be able to understand like when you have an error or can't connect, like where the problem actually is. I think last week or the week before, I was doing an example with GitHub, and my GitHub tool didn't work, and I wasn't quite sure what was going on, but it turned out GitHub was actually having a service interruption like during that moment as well. So something to be aware of, like when you're using these connections, is that it's not necessarily like the agent or the model, that you actually are like calling out to third-party services as well.
So this is actually, I will say, a little bit of surprising, because we've given it documentation, but it has a very reasonable kind of request back. Is you've looked at documentation, specific details are not directly listed on the main page. Let's say try searching all of docs. I'm gonna give it the link again. And so giving maybe a little bit specific more direction. In the beginning, we talked about kind of this iteration velocity of trying different ways to guide your agent to the right direction. Is kind of this interesting kind of back and forth that we've had. So you found documentation. Okay, I'm going to give it a little bit more direction here. Look at dgraph and the latest versions. So I'm going to point it directly at dgraph, which is our open source graph database. It kind of underlies kind of the knowledge graphs that are really powering the memory of our agents here. But it has been a very popular open source project for a very long time. And so again, directly from the web crawling, it's found the key features from the V25. I didn't specify exactly which one it was. I will say sometimes I forget what version we're on because we're moving so quickly. But it's kind of done a good job at summarizing the key features and pulling that information directly here. So let's just go ahead and try to kind of relaunch this. I think it's been some time since we've made any announcements. So draft a LinkedIn post. Dgraph. And the other thing I like to do is between our teams here, we have some of these best practices. So I've documented how we like to write LinkedIn. I'm going to copy the link here. Use these best practices for. And so this is a great way for you to maintain kind of the internal collaboration pieces that you have within your organization. Will, you and I work a lot over Notion, kind of going back and forth on ideas, on content, on ideas, even on best practices, on our tone and our brand. And so this is an easy way for the agent to leverage that, where I don't have to constantly be copying and pasting those best practices back into the agent. And so it's gotten the page and it has kind of this new draft that I had. It does follow best practices. I asked it to do, I think the optimal length is something like 600 characters. And let's maybe do a little bit of iteration. So maybe try another that is around opportunity. So I actually like to work with my agents and kind of like a brainstorming partner, go back and forth on the content, on the brand, on the messaging, and really just, your agent has infinite amounts of patience for you to go back and forth. And so I can pick two different ones. And so we can certainly continue to go back and forth, continue to iterate this, but I'm pretty happy with maybe these two options. I think a lot of other marketing folks out there now realize like the next step is, well, let's make sure our key stakeholders are happy with this copy before we go out and kind of drop it to the world. And so what I really like to do in Hypermode is schedule a meeting with my key stakeholders to review these two drafts. Use my calendar. Also use my availability. So it's going to pull now on a little bit similar to kind of the sidekick task, but it's going to grab calendars. It's going to really understand who my key stakeholders are based on the context that it has from the other pieces that I've given it. You see it's calling different pieces of that. But you can, why don't we like draft an email and save it. So it looks like it can't quite reach the calendar, which is fine. We will use a different way. I still also will send emails. Sometimes we do async reviews. Again, all you marketing folks out there know your stakeholders tend to be really busy. And so creating something async is a helpful way to still get eyes and approval on whatever you need to do to move forward. So
Jessica, could you say more about how the agent is determining who the stakeholders are? Is that based on the other attendees of meetings, or how are we determining the stakeholders?
Yeah, so as you work with your agent, it's going to certainly look at the other context that it has within that tool. And so, if you take a look at my calendar, you know that I meet regularly with you as our head of DevRel. I have a lot of kind of standing, repeated meetings with our CEO, with our head of product, with our operations lead. And so it will understand that context of kind of reasoning through those different pieces and making the best guess of who that actually is. And so I'm not quite going to pop over, but I will double check that I do have a draft saved in my inbox. And I will, I'll flash it on screen here, right? It pulled that information. It pulled some of the key stakeholders. It pulled kind of this alias for us. And that tends to be, again, a really fast way, a really great way to save time instead of me constantly trying to go between Google Calendars and the copy that I wrote. We could also put this back into Notion and share that out through Slack. There's different ways to adopt to the tools that your organization uses. And I think the 2,000 connections that we showed is a really easy way for you to make sure that whatever you're using in your everyday flow, that the agents are able to adopt to that. So I think this is kind of a very fairly simple example of how I've used kind of just how we relaunch different pieces, looking at different ways to pull information from the docs to get started. But Will, you also have kind of another example of leveraging different tools to kind of relaunch interesting features, functionality on social.
Yeah, let's take a look at another example. Oh, I lost my screen here. Let's share that again. There we go. So back where I left off, so I had just upgraded my workspace to Pro tier. So this is what you'll see with the concierge agent and the sidekick agent. For those just joining or who might have missed the upgrade path earlier, so we're doing a special fast track upgrade for folks watching the live stream. If you sign in with this link, hypermode.com/fast-track, and then you'll be prompted for a code. The code is for this live stream, hype-live-marketing. I'll drop that in the chat. And that will upgrade you to Hypermode Pro tier. That will allow you to create your own agents. So we can sort of follow the examples that Jessica was showing and what I'm going to show in a minute here. If you missed the live stream and the code expires and you're watching the recording, you can also click on the schedule onboarding session. And while we're in beta, we just want to go through a quick onboarding call to understand what folks want to build and set expectations and that sort of thing. Cool. So I want to show an example that is on sort of like the more like developer marketing side of things, that in developer relations that you might do of like communicating more technical content, right? So Jessica was showing we can follow like LinkedIn best practices for creating posts. We can leverage integrations with our email to draft follow-up emails for events. And what I want to show is how we can leverage the GitHub connection for Hypermode agents to create some more technical content and understanding like some code examples that we've written. Before I jump into that, I see a few questions in the chat. Let's address those. So Cecil says, "Hi, friends." Hey, Cecil from Stripe. Good to see you. We've been chatting with Cecil about using the Stripe MCP server with Hypermode agents, which is something we support and something we use internally, which is actually a lot of fun to help sort of manage and analyze your Stripe data. So looking forward to sharing more info about that. So thanks for watching, Cecil. Question here about how we can add our own tool. to the agent. Yeah. So we can choose from over like 2,000 different MCP servers. And I'll show an example of adding GitHub in a minute. So there are lots of, these are the connections in Hypermode agents that are tools exposed through Model Context Protocol. And if you want to create custom tools or sort of expose services that don't exist, I would say first ask us and submit a request for, hey, here's a tool or service that I want to add, and we can look at adding that. It's fairly straightforward for us to add new MCP connections. But then if you're wanting to build sort of your own custom tools, the Modus agent framework that I mentioned earlier is a good way to do that. Modus has an abstraction for building tools and then exposing that to your agent. So in the docs here, if we look at Modus, I'll just drop the link to the overview there. That can be a good way to add custom tools and then expose those to your agent through Modus, which is what is orchestrating the agents, all the agents that we're showing today. So that's a good question. Cool. And then I see a question about what model we're using. Yeah, so let me show creating a new agent, and I'll touch on the model piece. So I want to create a new agent. Jessica showed creating the concierge, that way of creating an agent. If we start a new thread with a Hypermode concierge and this sort of guided flow where it's helping us to develop that system prompt for the agent. But we can also just create an agent by manually specifying the role and background. I should say we can also upload our own avatar or switch between these random avatars. I like these Lego folks, but you can upload your own. I think that's an important important aspect of your agent team. So we want to create a sort of like developer advocate type agent, right? That's going to be able to understand like code and help us draft like tweets to explain some of these concepts. So let's just create our Bob Loblaw is my favorite developer advocate. The headline is technical content specialist. And then there's a craft to creating these system prompt, these instructions for the agent. I'm going to go just kind of quick here so we can get the gist, but we can really iterate on this. And concierge helps us like craft properly structured system prompt here. But let's say you are a developer advocate for Hypermode, skilled at communicating technical content for developers. And then here is the question we had earlier, which was what model or models are we running to orchestrate our agent? And we have a choice of lots of different models that we can choose from. And the reason you pick a model can vary depending on some trade-offs, right? So for example, like GPT-4o mini is maybe faster because it's a much smaller model, but maybe not always the best at orchestrating the right tool calls and this sort of thing. Claude models, Gemini models, these are all powered by Hypermode's model router that provides like one API surface for interacting with these different models. So if you're using model router, we use model router internally to facilitate switching different models. GPT-4o is kind of the default for us. I think that's a good general purpose model. Cool. So then the next thing we need to add are the connections. And I said earlier we had like 2,000 connections we can choose from. Here's some of the most popular that are listed here. But we can also search for like Strava, Stripe, if I spell it right, Stripe, like lots of different connections that most of those go through the OAuth flow. I'm going to add GitHub, which I've already authorized, and Notion. And so what I want to do is I have this GitHub repository where I've created a demo app, and I want to generate a social media campaign to kind of explain some concepts of how this works. So the first thing we'll say is analyze my Hypernews GitHub repo. So Hypernews is the name of the repo, and we can see here that our agent is going to first use the GitHub search repositories tool. So I gave it the name, and it's going to search for that repo. And then once it finds the repo, I asked it to analyze the repo. So it's going to like look at the pull requests, look at the issues, the branches, commits. It's going to look at the README. And then here's kind of, okay, we've got 17 stars, nine forks, Python. This is some knowledge graph, AI agent, graph rag, dgraph modus thing. So that sounds cool. Some commits, and then kind of a summary of what this is. So that's good. It can connect to my GitHub. Now I want to generate, let's say, 10 to 20 tweets that explain concepts from Hypernews. And so this is a project that I built for a conference workshop, but I kind of want to repurpose that to, explain some of the concepts in the repo. There are fun things in here like how to build a knowledge graph, how to create an agent on your knowledge graph, how to load the news data that this uses. There's a Next.js front end. And so here it's kind of explaining. We can do vector similarity search. Like, okay, that's good, but like this is technical developer content. So we want to add code snippets to each tweet where appropriate. And so now our agent might need to go back and look at some of the code files to actually see like, well, what are some relevant code snippets for these different tweets that we've generated? Because I want to be sure to include that in our like developer focused content, right? Even if they are tweets, it's helpful to have a code snippet here and there. And while we're doing that, we can kind of go through here and give these a once over just to make sure these are sort of in the right scope. I could also tell it like, hey, I want tweets that explain dgraph and modus and like the specific points that I want to hit on, right? Like I have a lot of flexibility. This can be like a very iterative task to work with my agent on this. But it kind of, I think, took from the README, roughly the main concepts here. And the README for this is, I don't know, fairly well structured. We can see what this actually looks like. This is Hypernews. This is this project here. Cool. Let's go back to our agent. Our agent is still thinking. Sometimes we get some timeouts there. So if you see an agent thinking for a long time, if you just refresh, sometimes you'll see it actually has finished. So something we're fixing on the back end there. But our agent has updated our tweets with code snippets where appropriate. So let's check these. So here's the first one talking about using dgraph, and yep, this is a DQL mutation, so that's appropriate for this. Here's a DQL query, some examples of importing modus. There's some Python scripts in here for loading the data, converting to RDF, so that's correct as well. So cool, that looks helpful. I don't want to just send these all at once. Let's save these tweets to my Notion. So I added the Notion connection here, which we can see here. And I accidentally clicked off the tab to start a new thread, but that's okay. It's still running here. So it's going to check to make sure we have access to my Notion. And then I don't want like a hyper news. I want to save these to my Notion Scratchpad page. Yeah, so I don't have an existing Hypernews page. That's why I said I want to save it to my Scratchpad page. I have Notion over here. So my Scratchpad page currently is empty. Let's see. See if we can populate this. So this should include the tweets that we drafted up above here, along with the code snippets as well. And so if we look at the tool calls, this first one is searching for Scratchpad page. And then I think now we're actually going to add it in here. Cool. Yeah. So now that populated there with the tweets from our agent. And so now we can schedule these to go out. We could also connect directly to like LinkedIn or social media to have our agent post those directly. But I want to just save these in my Scratchpad. We can also configure like which pages we give our agent access to in the workspace connection. So if or the workspace settings rather. So if I go here into settings and then connections, here's the connections I've added. And for Notion, I can go in and like update connection. And if we don't want to give it access to everything, like maybe I just want to give it access to my Scratchpad page, that's where I can configure that.
Well, I'm going to ask you, that's great. That's like a one-time thing that we've done. How do we create something that's repeatable, that we don't have to go through and explain to the agent every time you want to do something similar?
Totally. Yeah. So this was like a very iterative process, right? We had to kind of like teach our agent intern like what we wanted it to do. And so we have this concept of a task in Hypermode agents that for a given thread, if we click create task, we'll go through and look at the conversation, look at the thread, and turn this into a repeatable task that will then save to our agent, so we can then invoke that. And so the agent now has this task, and once we save it, as kind of like a learned skill, and that task is going through analyzing a GitHub repo, generating tweets, making sure there's code snippets included in the tweet. And so now, if I create a new thread, I have that skill added as a task, which I can invoke here, or on a schedule. I can invoke to run this like through the API, this sort of thing as well. And so this, I think, is like a really good abstraction, this concept of the task, and thinking of that as like a learned skill with our agent, because we don't want to go through this like iterative conversation every time, just like the way we don't want to, if we think of our agents as an intern, we're not going to have to like explain over and over the task that we want an intern to complete. Now we have like given our agent this skill, so they can then just kind of invoke that on demand, which I think is super useful.
I love that piece of it, right? I think I've gone through this realization that I used to do like one task per agent, and that got really repetitive, right? And so this aspect of saving the task and really thinking about the role that you want your agent to play, and then all the like activities or tasks that it does, that's been really powerful, right? It's a different way of thinking about. Again, we're going to continue using the intern, net new, teammate kind of analogy. I think that's a better way to be thinking about how we create these, whether through concierge, whether through going through kind of the system prompt that we'll walk through. But having the tasks, and then, we showed ones that didn't update in the 30 seconds that we built it, but you can imagine, hey, every Monday morning, I want to go through the change log or changes in my docs and create the tweets or the LinkedIn posts on a regular basis. And so I think that's a lot of the removing the toil piece that sometimes we get in marketing. That's been really helpful in agents.
Cool. Well, we're about out of time here. I see a question or two. If folks have questions, feel free to drop those in the chat, and we'll get to those. See a question here from Bazooka Blitz asking about support for visual creatives. I'm curious what you have in mind. Like, are you thinking of creating visual assets for marketing campaigns? And we're talking sort of about like marketing use cases here, or um, more like analyzing or interpretive visual assets. Could be a couple of options there. So I'm curious what use cases you have in mind. I will say on generating image assets is not something that we currently support out of the box in Hypermode agents. I think something that we're looking at, different ways of approaching that. There are some ability for uploading image content to the model, and having the model understand that. That's supported in Modus directly. But yeah, I'd love to know more about the use case or workflows you have in mind, as we're thinking about adding more features to agents, which is a good case to mention. If folks aren't already in our Discord, that's a great way to get a hold of us. So I'll drop a link to that in the chat, discord.hypermode.com. If you want to join there and let us know what you think, or ask any questions that folks have there, that would be great. See another question here asking, how can we route prompts to dynamically choose a model based on the prompt? Yeah, this is a good question. So we were showing earlier the different models that we support for orchestrating the agent. So like some of the Claude models, the default model that we fall to is GPT-4.1. Gemini is also supported. And typically the way we think with the agent experience is selecting a model that is aligned with the role and the tasks that you're giving your agent. So there are certain models that are better at generating code, for example. So I think like the Claude Sonnet models are typically thought of as better at generating code. The GPT-4.1 Mini is going to be faster. So if you're optimizing for that, then we typically think of that at the agent level. So that's kind of how I think of choosing that decision, is rather than for each like user message selecting the model dynamically at that point, rather at the like agent level. Of course, in this hosted Hypermode agents UI that we showed, you can always change the model just in that drop down if you want to manually select that. If you want to do this in code, in the Modus framework, which uses our model router, you can write some logic to select which model to use from model router as well. But that's sort of how I think about choosing different models for your agent.
I would also say, like, this is the time to experiment. As I alluded to, like, I read somewhere where O3 is supposed to be great at editing. So I have an editor agent, and I give it kind of different instructions. And so I will often, for example, write blogs or content with my product marketing agent and then hand it over to my editor agent that uses O3, but my other one uses a different model. But what I like about the kind of the setup for what we showed is like there's this really easy UX. Again, I've created hundreds of agents just to like test things out. And that's what I would encourage us to do. I think I know Will and I walked through pretty kind of straightforward, I think, examples of easy marketing use cases, but it's really just about getting started. And so if you want to try different models, it's really easy to swap it in and out. If you want to look at different tools, you can start with one, with like Sidekick, with like the Google Calendar, and then grow from there. But I think I would really encourage people just like get hands-on. And if you have feedback or if you find something interesting, like reach out to Will or me, and we can certainly double click into it with you, or showcase it. I think it's everyone's kind of in this together, and like trying and learning these new ways. And so I think there's kind of this great community that Will has on Discord to kind of have these types of conversations.
Yeah, we would love to hear feedback, or even just like use cases that folks have in mind. Like what are you wanting to build? How do you see agents fitting into your day to day, whether that's in your business or optimizing your personal life as well. Like I have tons of use cases that I have for just the day to day things. Always finding something new that I can do with agents. It's a fun time. Cool. Well, we are over time a little bit, so I think we'll have to leave it there for today. Thanks everyone for joining. Like we said at the top, this was the sort of first one that we've done where we're focusing on like a specific, I don't know, like vertical or specific like group of use cases. This was around marketing. We're going to do a follow up one with use cases for developers. We'll do another one maybe with more like sales. Focused. So if you have ideas also, like are there certain use cases you want to dive into for these sorts of events? That's definitely feedback we'd like to hear. We do have a model gallery, which I'll drop a link to that in the chat, that showcases some of the, or not a model gallery, an agent gallery that showcases some of like the example agents that folks have built that are sort of broken out by role. And also I'll drop a link also to our Luma calendar. So that's a good way to find events coming up in the future. So if you don't follow us on Luma, definitely add that. But yeah, thanks everyone for joining. Jessica, anything you wanna say or ask before we call it a day?
No, go build. Excited to see what you guys do.
All right, thanks everyone for joining. We'll